Any little decision in my life, I would either ask my pendulum or I would call on Julia and ask her to guide me. As soon as the crucifix was involved and as soon as Jesus was involved, this thing fled instantly. Hey guys, my name is Tara. I live in Florida and I'm so grateful to be here to share my testimony about how Jesus saved my life. It's been a long road, but we're just going to go back to the beginning so I can share a little bit of my upbringing, my childhood, and I'm just grateful for this opportunity. So thank you, Josh. Thank you, Jesus. And let's get into it. So I was raised Catholic. I, was going to church all my life from kindergarten. I mean, since I was a baby, I was baptized as a baby. Started going to private school. It was very regimented to go to church during the week with my class, and then also at the on the weekend with my family. So it was like a twice a week thing, very regimented, very religious thing, and so I was pretty used to it, but I never had any sort of intimate relationship with Jesus. And so this just kind of compounded because it never really struck me. It never really spoke to me in any way. And so I kind of found it boring, for lack of better words. I was just a kid and I didn't really see why this was a thing and why this was so important. But I am grateful for my upbringing because it did at least introduce me to the idea of Jesus, the idea of faith, the idea of God. So I'm always going to say how grateful I am for that because I really am. And so when I when I graduated high school in 2011, I went off to college. And so this was like my first little fit of like freedom and just total free reign on my life. And this was kind of like everything I ever wanted at this point in my life. In high school, I was getting into a little bit of trouble, but only so much because you can only get in so much trouble when you live at home with your parents, And so um, that's all I could really do when I was home. But when I went away, it felt like the world was my oyster and I had all the freedom in the world to just do the things I wanted to do. I had what you would call a typical college experience, partying, just not really staying focused on the things I needed to stay focused on. And also, mind you, I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. And so going into this new world, living alone for the first time, having just total freedom, like I said, to do whatever I wanted, this was probably the most dangerous thing for me. So this just like, I started going down this path where, I went to a major party school, and I think a lot of them are kind of party schools as it is. But yeah, I went to Florida State up in Tallahassee, Florida. And it was just everything I was looking for at that time in my life. And so every day of the week, there was something going on. And I was, just a young kid. I was 18 years old, and this just progressed and progressed, kept getting into trouble. And still at this point, like my relationship with faith was really nothing. It wasn't good or bad. I just didn't want to talk about God anymore. I didn't want to even really think about it. I wasn't interested. And so this was my final, like my first chance to not have to pay attention to it, because I did feel like I was kind of forced into it growing up. So it wasn't even a topic on my part, on my mind, anything like that. So for a few years, this just continued. And, the deeper you go and the more, the darker it gets because I was partying regularly and just getting involved in things I didn't need to get involved in. And so I also just like really struggled with my life purpose and identity. And so I didn't know what I was here to do. I didn't know why I am like, what is my purpose? What am I supposed to do in this life? And so this was also another reason that drove me to drink more and all of that, because I was just confused. Fast forward to 2014, and this is when one of my best friend at the time, she, I was supposed to go out with her and another girlfriend. But I, for some reason, and I know now this was God intervening, it was total divine intervention, but for some reason I didn't go with them that night, and they ended up getting into a tragic car accident. She was drunk driving, and my other friend in the front seat, she survived, but the girl driving, her name was Julia, she did not survive. And so this completely just like turned my world upside down. I was 21. And so I not only, like I have shared already, I was very confused in life. I had no direction. I didn't know who I was. I was on a dark path. And so then this happens. And it very much just, I didn't know what was up from down, what was left from right. And so from there, I remember making a vow to myself that I was never going to love again. I was never going to, and it sounds funny because she was my best friend, but when there's grief, it really just shows that there was so much love there. And she was my best friend. So I remember making a vow to myself that I'm just never going to love anyone again because that should protect me. That was my mindset. Obviously, not a very healthy one, but I was so hurt. And so you can imagine how hard my heart was in this moment. It was like an immediate hardening of my heart. And so then I just continued, on this darker path because I had no ability or tools in my tool belt to handle this. So it progressed and continued for a few years, and in those few years, I got into a pretty toxic, unhealthy relationship. And that is actually what drove me to leave Tallahassee for good. I finally reached a point where I was like, I don't know why I'm here anymore. My health is declining mentally, spiritually, emotionally, physically. I don't know my purpose. I'm going to school for what? Like, I have no idea why I'm going to school. I was trying to just finish school to get the degree, to get the piece of paper. There was no motivation behind it. There was no like real drive. And so I just got really real with myself. And I said, if I stay here, it felt like it was a fork in the road decision moment where if I stayed there, I think I would have gone past return. Although with the Lord, there is no one is too far gone, but I just mean like it was a really dark time. So called my parents. They live in Florida as well, just in a different city. And so I called them and I said, hey, I think I need to move home. I think I need to just get my head on straight. I'm not well. So I moved home. So grateful to have supportive parents, loving parents that, were willing to take me in. And so I lived with them for almost a year. In that year, I went to a school down the street for just like a program for home staging. So I learned, how to do interior design and stuff like that. And so I was getting a little bit more momentum going in purpose. And so this felt really, really good. But after breaking up with that previous relationship, I was grieving that as well. And so I was kind of ready for freedom because that relationship also felt very, it held me down a lot. So when I broke off that relationship, I'm home now, but I'm trying to navigate the breakup, trying to navigate my life, trying to navigate, what do I do from here? And a few of my friends had moved to Tampa, Florida. And so I thought, well, let me go check it out. I don't know what my next move is, but I know I'm not living home forever. So I started to visit, and long story short, I fell in love with it. I had friends there. It felt like the next step for me. And so in this next step, I moved out there, and I'm so grateful for that because I met incredible people along the way. I did end up, dating someone new. This relationship was a longer relationship. It was about 4.5 years. It led me to therapy, which in hindsight, it was a little rough, but I think, they always say like you meet the same person in a different body until you really, work through your stuff. And so I started going to therapy, and I knew that I needed some help anyways because of the grief. And so this is kind of where the new age venture begins because obviously my best friend passing, I was grieving that, and I was also very curious about where she was. I was like, where did she go? I don't understand. Is she in heaven? Is she somewhere else? Is she next to me? Can I talk to her? Like, is she okay? And so that already sparked my curiosity in communicating with her. But I didn't put a name to that. I didn't understand what that was. I didn't know I could go, seek a psychic or anything like that. And I didn't really feel the pull to do that just yet. But when I started seeing this therapist, it was through a referral. And this therapist was actually a hypnotherapist. And so, I walk into her office and I see all these like new age paraphernalia, crystals, things like that. And I just was like, wow, this is like, I was starting to get a little curious about spirituality because before I made the decision to go to therapy, I was doing personal development stuff on my own. Which is kind of where it really started as well. Like it starts with one personal development book. Before you know it, you're like looking into The Secret, which teaches you law of attraction. And then you're reading something else about like how you're the healer of your life and you don't need saving and all these things. I had such good intentions. And so there's so much grace for that. But yeah, it just snowballs really, really easily. And so a dream that I share pretty frequently when talking about this is a dream I had in New Age. I was in the thick of New Age, and it was a recurring dream. It was very demonic. It was in my old apartment in Tampa. It was the same setting, everything, but in the dream, like the first few times, it was just this dark entity, like paranormally, like chasing after me in my apartment, and it was just straight after me, and I didn't know why. And then the very last time that this dream occurred, it was like a step higher. It was gory, there was blood on the walls, like it was very, very intense. And I remember being on my bed, and the spirit, like, was just chasing me down. And at a certain point, I just was like on my bed. I was like cornered at this point. I was just sitting there and I was like, I don't know what to do. And it's looking right at me. And I just remember, like, out of nowhere, mind you, I'm in New Age, right? So I wasn't thinking about Jesus at all. But out of nowhere, I reach over and I somehow had a crucifix that was handy in the dream. And I don't even know what I said. I don't know, I really feel like Jesus just like stepped in and took over. And this thing instantly, as soon as the crucifix was involved and as soon as Jesus was involved, this thing fled instantly. Never had the dream again. And it didn't really make sense to me at the time, but obviously looking back, I see now that that was an attack. In therapy, I was working on that relational trauma, the grief. But because she was also in New Age at the time, we were doing hypnosis, we were doing past life regressions. She was giving me books and references and resources on, just types of healing that kind of introduce you to New Age ideology. And so, she taught me how to heal with crystals and stuff like that. It snowballed. Just again, it's the nature of those types of things. And so, this helped heal me or made me feel like I was making progress temporarily. And then she actually ended up getting radically saved by Jesus. And so this was a pivotal point in my story. She stopped doing all the things, hypnotherapy, all the New Age stuff. She repented, turned away from all of that, and completely just left her practice altogether. And so she was a major help in redirecting me. And so she was a safe place for me for a really long time. And so her and I would talk about what's going on in the world. We would talk about how that affects our spirituality, our faith, what that can do to our mental health and what might be to come. And so my curiosity, I've always been a curious person. When I was starting to go deeper into what was going on in the world, I learned about the evil in the world. And that was something that New Age does not like talking about because it makes it real. And when you understand the reality of the evil and the reality of there is a real enemy and there is someone that does not like you, does not like Jesus, and wants to take you away from Jesus, that was made real to me. And it actually was through just my digging through what's going on in Hollywood and the music industry and all those things. And it was just so humbling because in my research, I had come across just like hidden symbolism, secret societies, all this stuff. And in that digging, I started to see all these occultish practices and, these symbols and stuff. And I was looking at that, knowing what I knew in New Age. And I was like, why are these parallel? Why are these similar? What am I missing here? did I get myself into something that I maybe don't know much about after all? Is it maybe not so innocent after all? And so comparing the two, lining things up, and just getting really deep into it, that's when I was revealed the truth. And that was in 2021 of November. So coming up on 3 years this November, and that's when I knew that, this was the truth. And the Lord revealed himself to me through that. And, he so graciously showed me all the things that I had in my house that, needed to go. That being, tarot cards, crystals. I had a pendulum that I regularly used, art on the walls that was not glorifying him, books, all my books that I was so religious about, my yoga mat, anything that had to do with any other spiritual practice that, I used, because every single day I was like religiously doing my rituals every morning. I was pulling cards, I was channeling, I was transcendentally meditating. I was just communicating also with my spirit guides. And that's another major part that, of course, ties in with my late best friend, because that was a major reason why also, I started seeing psychics. To be honest, I started, getting curious about studying mediumship. I was so intrigued and I was reading up on it. I was, seeing multiple psychics regularly. And every time I would go to a psychic, or I would go to someone who, specialized in numerology or something that, you could break down the future and use divination to see into the future. Or they read my birth chart and astrological sign. I got really into that. And so every time I went to one of these sessions, they would always like tell me, you could be doing this. Like they would always like encourage me, of course, to tap into those giftings myself. So of course I left these sessions thinking like, wow, it's like this spiritual ego, the spiritual high, and this boost, this like, it puffs you up thinking like, wow, I'm so spiritual. Wow, I'm so gifted. And so I started, wanting to study mediumship. And the Lord redirected that, because I don't know how he did, but I just never ended up going through with it. But all these things packaged into one, I knew in November 2021 it was wrong. And so I repented, all of those things. And so I am so grateful for that. But this has been such a journey even since then, because yes, I knew that was the truth, but I still had not yet understood what spiritual warfare was, or how to combat it, I guess you could say, because looking into the evil of the world, I very much knew that there was evil. But I didn't know that, we could combat that with authority and dominion, through Jesus Christ. I didn't know that, we were not given a spirit of fear. I didn't know how to fight against those things. And so I am very like someone that I speak out openly. I speak out about what I believe. I speak out about, what I'm going through. I've always been an open book in that way. And so when I was spiritual in New Age, I was sharing openly on my social media about all that, which no one had a problem with. But as soon as I started sharing that I got saved by Jesus, everyone had a problem with that. And so because I was not firm enough in my foundation with my faith yet. I knew this was the truth, but I wasn't firm enough in it yet. I got on social media thinking that I was doing everyone a favor and, saving them from this burning house. I kind of unintentionally acquired like a savior complex. I didn't realize it, but I was trying to help. I mean, I think anybody coming from New Age, when you realize like, oh my goodness, this is not love and light. This is not what you think it is. I have friends in this. I have people I love and care about that are deceived as well. Like, let me pull them out. Well, I learned very quickly that people do not like to hear that. I didn't understand how that ties in with spiritual warfare, though, because I had such negative feedback. I had people in my DMs that were, just, it was venomous. Like, there was just messages that were so discouraging. There was messages that were hateful. There was messages that, they're just beating me down on my newfound faith and what I was sharing. And I understand now, I think my approach, I meant well, but I also think in retrospect, like, I think there is such a grace and an art to sharing the truth with people. Not everyone's going to receive it well. I mean, it could be dripping in love and not everyone's going to receive it well, but the way that I was sharing it, I think spread fear. And I see that, looking back, but it's a journey. And so because of the feedback that I got, this terrified me. I lost friends. There was discord in my relationships, and then I got confused again. And so all of this in a nutshell just led to this moment of like, well, shoot, like I got confused once, I got deceived once. Could I be deceived again? Could I be confused? And this was such a mental, this was tumultuous because I didn't know what I could trust at this point, although I felt like I knew the truth, which I did. Voices, outside voices, spiritual warfare, and all that. When you're fresh out of the kingdom of darkness, I always say, like, you have a target on your back and you have to be mindful. And so, what I did wrong was I didn't get plugged into community. I didn't fully understand. It's not that I did that. Not understanding it correctly is not doing it wrong. That's just where I was in my walk. But not getting plugged in with the right community definitely hurt me, and not, staying very disciplined in reading the Bible and all those things. I just didn't fully understand what I was supposed to be doing every day. And so, yeah, I got confused. And long story short, I backslid a little bit. And it's not that I didn't know the truth anymore. I knew the truth, but I just didn't want to talk about it anymore because it was creating a lot of discord in my life. And I was like, well, I don't want to make this claim. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. And so I put my Bible away. I took the cross off the wall. I was like, I don't know. I'm not making any claim, but I don't want to talk about it anymore because this is creating too much turmoil in my life. And so, of course, putting God to the side led to chaos, as it would. And, I got back into the party scene and, just all that very quickly, very, very quickly, because I was coping and I just wanted to numb. I didn't want to think about this anymore. And mind you, this is a sidebar. Like, in the spiritual exploration journey that I was on, like I had reframed my relationship with alcohol entirely. But the reason that I feel that I went back is because I didn't do that with the Lord. I did that in my own strength. And I didn't even know the Lord at the time. And I'm so grateful for that year of no drinking that I did. But I see now how when we do things in our own strength, it doesn't always, last long term. And so that being said, it was very easy for me to go right back to it after taking a whole year off. And, it just led to a really dark place again. And December 2022, I called on Jesus again and I said, Lord, like, I'm so sorry that I'm doing this again and asking you to reveal yourself to me when you've already done so. But if you are willing, can you please show yourself to me again and just let me know in a way that makes sense to me that you are really the way, the truth, the life, and I will do this. He did, of course, in the next few days, he showed up in some really concrete ways. I mean, literally in the concrete. I was walking my dog and I was fidgeting with my fanny pack. I looked down and Jesus is in the concrete, like his name in the concrete, just right where I stood. And that was just one scenario. There's a few other ones, but I'll spare you guys. It was so encouraging because I think the Lord knew my love for signs and feeling like, he sees me and feeling like there's hope. And so I knew that was the truth again. And I was like, all right, let's buckle up. We're doing this again. Like, we are going to stand firm in this. It took me a little bit longer to speak openly about it again, just because of the last time. But I gave myself grace there, and I just wanted to have the intimacy with Jesus. And so that's where the intimacy really began, is when I allowed it to be intimate and I allowed us to grow one-on-one together. And so in that, like, it just grew beautifully, and I just started to learn more and more. And I was still going to this therapist, and she was helping me so, so much to stay on the right track, to stay rooted in my faith, and to stay just so focused on this narrow path. And she actually referred me to a church in the local area that, does deliverance and prayer. And so this is what I always say too is a huge part of my journey as well, is when I received deliverance. Because although I knew that, seeing psychics was wrong and all these things, I still had doors open. I had still come into legal agreement with some other things. Like I had thrown things away, but I had to shut those things down in the spiritual realm. I needed to come out of agreement with those things. I needed to renounce, denounce, and be freed of those things. And, some of that can be done through prayer and fasting on your own time, obviously, and the Lord can deliver you on a dime. But I was ready for like utmost deliverance. And so I went to this deliverance ministry, and the first thing they, asked me, they were just getting to know me. And I told them about the traumatic situation of my best friend. And they said, okay, like, well, do you still communicate with her? And I'm thinking like, well, I don't go to mediums and I don't go to psychics anymore. So like, I'm good. But yeah, I communicate with her sometimes, just being honest. And, they of course kindly were like, well, what we're going to do now is we're going to renounce that, because that is a familiar spirit that has been, that you've been communicating with. That's not your best friend. It's actually an abomination to God to communicate with the dead. And we have to set you free from that right now. And this was, 9 years into, me communicating with her and like relying on her. And I always say like, unintentionally, I made her my idol, my God, because in situations, I'm talking like relationships to get in, opportunities, job opportunities, like where I would move next, any little decision in my life, I would either ask my pendulum or I would call on Julia and ask her to guide me. And I got really, really good at asking for signs. And, I was really, really invested in law of attraction and kind of incorporating all of this into one. And so I got really excited when a sign would come my way from Julia. And so I would take that and make real life decisions based on these things. And so looking back too, I always like to share this part too. It's like, I look back at all those decisions that I was led into by this familiar spirit, and it always led to destruction. It always led to chaos. It always led to a relationship or a circumstance that had no fruit of the spirit. And God would not do that. And so anyways, deliverance, that whole situation, you would think that I would think that in that situation, I would not be open-hearted and open-minded to renouncing because of my attachment to her and my attachment to this spirit. But I knew in that moment, the best way I can explain it is I felt like God just like cracked me open and cracked my heart open and was like, this is the time to receive this. Like, you are here, you are ready to receive this. It's time. And so I sat there and I said, okay, Lord, like I will do this if this is you. And I did. And so I always say like deliverance, I went a few more times after that. And, they were just praying over me. They were asking me, what other things I may have come into agreement with, my astrological sign, my just past practices that I have done that open demonic doors, yoga, Reiki was a big one, just anything, chakra healing and stuff like that. And so they just renounced all of it. And I felt so liberated and free from all these things. And I now at this point had understood, the authority that we have in Jesus and how the spiritual realm and these things are very active today. And he gives us full authority in him and in his blood, and how, the spiritual realm is like a legal court system. And if we give legal access to something, we are signing a contract, and we need to break that contract. And so deliverance changed my life. It just allowed me to really understand the severity of, the whole idea that like our intentions are only what matter is so misleading, because yes, we can have good intentions on something, but I always say this too, this is like the best way to, I like to envision it. It's like if I were to sit here and open all the doors and windows to my house and say, well, no bugs are going to get in my house because it's my intention that they don't, but all the doors and windows are open, it's silly. It sounds silly because it's like, well, how do you have any control over that? You gave your consent when you opened the door. So, especially when those bugs and those critters are looking and waiting for an open door, if you go and open that door, your intention doesn't matter. These spirits do not care. We think that we can go do these things and have, and also like almost taking advantage of the blood of Jesus. Some people will say, well, I'm protected, I can go do these things. And that is abusing the grace. And so I learned very quickly how important it is to shut the doors. and also to maintain spiritual hygiene moving forward. It's one thing to get deliverance. It's also another thing to make sure that I'm walking in holiness, I'm walking in righteousness, and I'm filling myself with the Spirit daily and doing the things I need to do to make sure that they don't come back, because we can, be released of these entities, these spirits. But if we don't fill ourselves with the Holy Spirit, they're just going to come back. And so that was a pivotal part on my journey. And so I'm always just advocating for whatever, you feel you need, always take it to the Lord. But I stand by, and I firmly believe deliverance is for the believer, because you have to be filling yourself with the Holy Spirit afterwards. And a non-believer is not going to be doing that. So that's why it is for the believer. And that was last year. And ever since then, I was really starting to just grow more and more with my faith and my intimacy with Jesus, which was a whole different experience than what I, experienced in 2021. I felt like a relationship with him was what I was finally getting to experience. And, it's so beautiful. And so this last year, I'm 31 now. And so, being 30 a year ago, like I was like, I think I'm ready for a relationship. I think I'm ready for like a healthy, God-centered marriage relationship. And as I was praying about it, the Lord humbled me and he said, well, you want this man of God, but are you the woman of God that you can really be? Like, you're doing great, but are you the woman of God that you really can be? And so that was like kind of my like inspiration to keep moving forward and just focus. And so ever since then, I've just been really keeping my head down as much as possible and focusing on my relationship with the Lord. And we are here now. I've rebranded my business. I'm going to church regularly. Like, I am passionate about sharing openly on social media, as you know, and I have such amazing community. Like, I am so grateful for the friendships that I have. I am so I'm fervently praying for my friends that are still in New Age. I am just so, heartbroken over the people I know and love that are still in that realm. But I know that, the Lord is handling it. And I know that our prayers really do, he does hear our prayers. And so that's kind of where I'm at with all of that. But it's just so beautiful to be where I'm at now. So.
And we have some exciting news. We are looking to help people who want to get into YouTube or even just social media in general. If you feel like God's calling you, to start a ministry, to preach online, but you just don't know how to start, or you're nervous and you want someone to walk you through it and help you, we can help you with that. So there's going to be a link below to the website if you want to go check it out. I look forward to hopefully working with you. So yeah, God bless.